On today's episode, something fishy is happening on the shores of Norway. Two rival fictional companies, Marlax and Meyer Fjordbruk, are in a cutthroat struggle for the shares of recently deceased Ole Richard Lykke. If Marlax CEO Julia Lange gains control, her planned hostile takeover of Meyer Fjordbruk will be all but complete. Current Fjordbruk CEO Gert Meyer isn't going down without a fight, however. The show is called Billionaire Island. On this podcast, we like to discuss the most recent installments of a different series every show. The first two episodes of the 6-part Netflix saga are titled Hostile Takeover and Desert Salmon. So my first question for you is, as a big Total Drama Island fan, were you disappointed that this wasn't in English?
I don't see the connection between the two shows.
Two islands?
One is a cartoon and a reality show-esque.
Right.
And then this...
When you first heard about this, you didn't think it was going to be a reality show with like a bunch of people pretending to be billionaires?
No, because I had read the summary for it.
Wait, you knew that this was going to be Succession, but on an island?
I knew it was going to be like, just on an island with rich people.
Okay. Well, that's where you and I differ. I was completely expecting like Sunset Miami or something like that, where there was just going to be some rich assholes trying to do... I didn't know why this was on our list of like next shows to do until I watched the first episode.
So you thought that this was going to be a reality show. You didn't know it was going to be a drama.
Yes. My second question then is, how many billionaires do you think that there are in the world?
Oh, you've asked me that question before.
But it changes.
Yeah, I'm probably going to be far off. 27, maybe?
27 people?
Yeah.
You were really close, but it's 2,700 people. 2,781 is what 2024's results were. What country do you think has the most?
Well, probably the U.S.
Well, it's not the U.S. It's actually China. So they're neck and neck. Both have 800 something, but I think China has like 12 more.
Is China's population more than the U.S.? I think it is, right?
Yeah, China's like in the billions and we're in like the hundreds of millions. But yeah, so Norway though, if we're speaking, because this is a Norwegian television show, and I wanted to see how accurate it was because the town that it takes place in, or the island that it takes place in, is fictional. So are the companies. But how many billionaires do you think are in Norway?
Oh, God, I don't...
If there's 800 in the U.S.
Yeah.
And Norway is significantly smaller.
Way smaller. I'll go with like 100 maybe.
12. There are 12. So it's possible to have a billionaire island in Norway. But how many of them are actually, if you do the deep dive, in the fishing industry? Are there any?
Okay, out of 12?
No, I'm not asking you. This is really just a research question that I put together. There's real estate people there. There's banking people there, supermarkets, retail chains, cruises, hotels. And then Kjell Ing Rok built a leading worldwide fishery business. I was so happy to see his name there, and I was like, well, there it is. So this might be based on that guy. But then I went on to the next name on the list, Gustav Magnar Witzzo. I'm going to murder these pronunciations. But born in 1993, one of the youngest billionaires in the entire world. He's a significant shareholder of a salmon fish farming company called SalMar ASA. And if that isn't right on the point of this show, which is two companies that are both like salmon producers.
Yeah, but none of the main characters are 31. This guy's
Their
31.
Families.
Yeah,
Their
but
families are.
He's 31 and he's a billionaire?
Yes, he's a billionaire. He's 31 years old, but he's not even Norway has the youngest billionaire and the third youngest billionaire, but they're both heiresses, and they're both sisters, Alexandra and Katharina Andresen. But they, I don't think, have anything to do with the fishing industry. But that is an interesting fact that out of all 2,000 something, when you only have 12 in your country, you have 3 of the youngest.
Yeah.
But the fishing industry is profitable, which was a surprise to me because I've seen things like Seaspiracy, and I know that overall, like, we're getting less and less fish in the ocean to eat. And it's becoming harder and harder. So you would think that would go down the line and actually hurt the business. But it seems like people are still making a profit.
But you see, I didn't get documentaries when we were watching this. I got Glass Onion. Really, I'm talking about the first episode. Skam, because that was also a Norwegian show. So the second that they started speaking it, I was able to
connect it. We never reviewed
it.
Skam, but we did review the show that one of the actors
Ragnarok.
Exactly. That was the last and one of the only Norwegian shows that I'm aware of that we reviewed.
And then, but I think that Skam and this are completely different. The only thing I got connection was Norwegian, but also Succession.
What about Henny? Henny is the kind of up and comer. She's a kid, and she's having kind of what are those movies called? Coming of age. Yeah, it's sort of a coming of age tale for her and her brother.
It's not the same. They're just too different. But then I also got Succession, The Fight for Control, Inheritance as well. The Perfect Couple, I didn't see that show, but I did watch the first 20 minutes, and the party where they're on a separate island is a lot like the party in the first episode of that.
White Lotus?
White Lotus I got actually in the second episode because you're introduced to a lot of different characters there. Chinatown, because you wouldn't think that something about water rights, and in this case it would be the salmon industry, would be interesting, but here I thought that they were able to actually make it that way and come up with something compelling. And also Beef, because you have two somewhat unlikable characters continually screwing each other over and over and over again.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I can see the beef relation. And Bjørnstad and Eilif Skodvin, who created Lilyhammer, also created this. And they literally said that they just wanted to make a show about salmon billionaires. They put it on the line like that. And I find it interesting that they started off with a death. So before the show even starts, there's this guy who was in Dubai who owned shares in both the competing companies, and he dies. And then Julie, the main one of Marlax, she runs in there trying to get his shares so that she can then take over the other company.
Well, I may be wrong, but didn't they say that the person that died had more shares in Geert's company? He was a massive shareholder in
Fjordbruk.
Yeah,
he has enough in Fjordbruk where if she got hold of them, then she would become the majority shareholder and be able to control everything. So that's why she's trying to do that. And so she doesn't realize that there's this Dubai company there that actually, or the bank that owns or has a right to his shares as well. She just goes directly to the guy's mom, who's just a fisherman, but she's a fisher lady. And so she just kind of solicits her for those shares. And even though she's not a very popular person herself, Julie is able to convince this mom character because she used to date Geert, the mom did, and she has like a saltiness in that relationship that Geert is like, I guess, abandoned that love. And so now it just becomes a very like messy family drama between the two families.
Between the two of them, Julie and Geert, and I know you've only watched the first two episodes like me, which one are you going for as of this point?
See, that's the thing. That would be in my cons because honestly, I don't care who wins.
You don't care at all?
After seeing this, it does seem like Julie is the more malicious of the two. Geert is more like an old-timey billionaire where he doesn't really use all the money that he has at his disposal. She's more flashy with it. Her kids are being thrown more massive parties. He's just...
Julie is more behind the scenes, I think, villainous. While Geert's villainous, or like, I guess him being mean, is just more outspoken. Yeah, his villainy is more outspoken. Like, he's not afraid to just kind of say whatever he wants to, while Julie has to very much in Succession way, like, keep up her public image while in the background doing just, like, bad things.
Well, they live parallel lives. They live very close by one another, and they even attend the same church, and their families do too. So they're throwing two separate celebrations at the same time: him for his grandson, and her for her daughter, right?
Yep.
And it's at that time when it breaks in Geert's world that she is making a hostile takeover move, that she is trying to get these shares and that he may no longer be CEO of his own company. So he, by the end of episode 1, is going over to her place and yelling at her in the midst of this party that she's throwing, and his grandson just happens to overhear them because he's also crashed that party.
I think, Felix is the one that overhears it. And that was definitely, I think, goes more to my point of Geert just being more outspoken. He was not afraid to cause a scene, even though when Felix does kind of make his appearance known, he tries to downplay it a little bit.
I think he loses his temper, but overall, I think he's a good guy, or that's what we're led to believe. Because in the second episode, these guys from Dubai, kind of shady, they come up to him and they say, "Hey, we need you part of our company, otherwise, it's going to collapse, and you don't have to do anything. You literally just be like a figurehead." And he takes that information and he uses it to make sure that the shares that the guy who died shares stay with his company, but he does it in a completely legal manner. And yes, he one-ups the Julie lady, but he doesn't do anything illegal. Now, his kid and his kid's wife, they're the ones who make a plan to, I think, cut one of the salmon fishery, like, you know how they have the salmon
Yes,
farms in the middle of
right.
the ocean that she's trying to turn into golf courses at the same time.
Right, yeah.
They cut the bottom of one, allowing a ton, like I forgot how many fish to escape.
50,000 fish to escape, reflecting badly on Julia with negative publicity.
But Yurt doesn't know that was his own people who did it, you know? So I don't think he was complicit in it. And so if he gets in trouble for it later on, like, it's kind of leading us to believe, because Julie's daughter, Amy, finds out about that afterwards, and it looks like she's going to raise a tuckus about it, or, like, you know, like, raise an issue.
When we were talking about that part of the story, I think that's when the series is at its strongest, when we focus on Yurt and we focus on Julie. But I felt like every other character, either where it came from Amy when she's having an affair with a photographer, to Henny just being kind of caught stranded on that little island, to even like Ole's funeral service, I just felt like the series was never able to be as interesting as the main story was. Did you get that feeling?
Yeah, in order to be successful as a television show that separates itself from Succession, because yes, you got your foot in the door by saying we're going to be Succession with fish,
Right.
but you need to do something different than just have all your characters be scummy, have something different than just showing the pettiness of richness, because no offense to Norwegian richness, but the way that it is depicted is never going to be as ostentatious or in your face as American use of money.
Very
Like,
much so, yeah.
when you see the way that people were spending it in Succession and where they were able to shoot, and just the egregious, like, self-centeredness of how these people spend money compared to these Norwegian folks who are also billionaires, also have that money to spend. The worst we get here is that they bring in a K-pop band, and then it's only 3 people, and they bring them in through a helicopter to perform for the daughters.
That was the best part of the first episode.
It was hilarious.
That was, yeah.
But it wasn't nearly as ostentatious as something American would be. So it needs to separate itself from that if it wants to be good. And then it also needs to show more than just affairs and the backstabbing and the disloyalty that we're used to seeing. And I agree with you. It doesn't really do that. And I agree that it also has too many characters to keep track of. You have Julie, Gyurt's wife, Gyurt's kids, Gyurt's grandkids, all of her family. I don't even know how many kids she has at this point. I know one has to go to, or wants to go to Hollywood. There's Henny. I know you just dissed her by saying, like, her second storyline wasn't, but she's probably my favorite character because at least stuff is happening with her. Like, at least I feel like she's a real person in this show versus most of them who could die and I would not care. If she died, I'd feel a little sad.
The characters, yeah, they're also very stereotypical. As you just mentioned, JJ, who's Julia's son, he wants to be a young actor. You have Ivo, who's like the same age
like
as
manager.
JJ, but he's like, yeah, the agent. And it just doesn't really seem like I can care too much about characters.
Why do they even exist in the show? You take them out, you just keep Henny there, and I think that it would be just as good.
I would just love it to be Marlax versus the mayor's company and just see who ends up being CEO just based off of that.
And there were a lot of characters in Succession.
Yes.
That's not what I'm not trying to say. But in the first few episodes, they really did try to keep you knowing about the immediate family. Shiv, Roy, Kendall, like the 4 of the siblings and also the dad.
Yeah.
Like, it was mainly them.
You'd
see a lot of side characters, but they wouldn't get their own scenes until like season 2, season 3, once they'd grown enough for that. Right. This, you got 6 episodes, probably a mini series, or I don't know. It's actually, they might not be a mini series, but like, I just don't think it could do what it did here, which is introduce all these people and then expect people to not lose patience.
Even the relationships, you don't fully understand. Like Amy's husband, I really don't understand why he's in the show. Also, it's like just hard to keep track of like everything that they're throwing at you.
Amy's husband's in the show to be cucked, basically. At this point.
But it's like, how many times have we seen that anyways?
It's endless drama.
I did like, though, the music. I thought it was very similar to Succession in terms of kind of the strings. Again, it's 6 episodes, so it is short in that way, even though the episodes are about 45 to 50 minutes long. And I did think that the second episode was actually better than the first. I'm glad that they didn't just stick these billionaires on an island and just had them hash it out. It's like, no, you actually get to see the politics of the salmon.
The Dubai people who show up in that second episode,
right,
again, try to get Gyurt to sign on, but end up signing on with Julie, which screws over Gyurt.
Well, she realizes that she needs to, because at this point, Gyurt has already
Gyurt let the cat out of the bag. If he had kept it close to vest and he hadn't told Julie at the funeral that like he still retains his own shares or Ole's shares, then everything would have been okay for him.
Right.
So that's where his sin came into play. But they refer to it as being pawns in their chess match, which I agree with, but it's a very predictable chess match. Right now, she comes in there trying to do a hostile takeover, and then they sabotage it by cutting her like fishing lines. And then there's this struggle over the deceased shareholders' shares, and then the takeover's called off, and then the takeover's back on. It's so easy to track that it makes me feel like it's not the writing that's the issue, because there are funny jokes in there, but it's the plot. The plot itself is my main frustration.
And I feel like it's going to kind of follow the beef route, which, not to spoil it, but it's not really that big a spoiler. I feel like there's going to be some type of event that makes Julie and Geert realize that they have to come together. Now, if they're going to backstab each other when that happens, you don't think that's going to happen?
I think like with Waystar, these are executives that are not, they're not going to become friends. They're like,
but in beef, they don't become friends either, but they end up having to work together.
I don't even think they're going to game. I think they've already built that respect up until now. They're just trying to cannibalize one another. Julie more so. Julie, I don't understand what's specifically motivating her, because she has so much money already. Her family is fractured. She's needed with her family. Like, fix your family's issues. And she's also not making more friends while she's doing this. She's using up the friends that she has.
Well, I think the whole entire
make
point,
herself bigger.
The whole entire point of Julie, she's fighting for the merger issue. She doesn't really care about the issues.
Right,
with her
but it's
family.
like a very capitalist thought process, which I wouldn't think would be Norwegian. Really.
Yeah.
That's why there's only 12 billionaires in Norway versus in anywhere in the US. I'm just confounded by why she's so set on trying to take over what does she get out of it in the end, except for just more money?
I know you said you don't care, but it seems like from the way you're talking about the two characters, you want Geert to get it more than Julie, at least.
Not necessarily. I just don't have Geert hasn't worked up enough empathy for me to want him to win. I think his kids are weird too.
Yeah, very much so.
Or his kid, the one who's married to, they seem like they're very sneaky and stuff.
Trine is Geert's daughter, and then Felix is Geert's grandson, and then
even the son-in-law, I think the one who was cutting the Jello. And
I
that
was
gonna
say
scene too.
Edgy. Actually, the Jello scene. I know I said the K-pop scene. Probably the Jello scene where he is trying to explain everything.
That's where
with the
I say
cake.
the writing's really decent, because you have the K-pop scene, the Jello scene, the scene where they're pitching Julie on setting up these golf courses. It's got a dark comedy to it. That's cool. I like the English and Norwegian mix. Every once in a while, they'll flip into English. That's also fun. The location's beautiful when the kids are stuck on the reef. But all that stuff is kind of not why you tune into a show like this, right? Review-wise, what do you give it?
Oh, I'm probably going to give this a 6 out of 10. It passes, but I don't have enough interest in seeing the last 4 episodes.
It has a 5.5 on IMDb, 4 stars from The Guardian. They really liked it. Wall Street Journal called it Dallas, Succession, and even The Borgias as far as family dramas about dysfunctional families with too many assets and a shortage of scruples. I would personally not recommend it. I would say 4 out of 10. I'm not going to pass this thing, but I do find the idea of private concerts, the one that they threw for Henny, just so crazy that I wanted to do some research on it. And here's a few facts for you. So speaking of Dubai, because that's where those guys are from, Beyonce was paid the most, as of what we know right now, to perform, I think it was a year or two ago, in Dubai, at Atlantis, the Royal Hotel or Beach Resort, $24 million at least.
$24 million.
They haven't locked down on the figure, but they say it was at least $24 million for one performance. Before that, there were also some pretty notorious events. In 2002, private equity billionaire David Bonderman paid the Rolling Stones $18.7 million to perform for his 60th birthday. And then John Mellencamp was also paid to be there, as well as Robin Williams, who would come in and entertain the crowd.
So he's
in the middle of it.
He's in the middle of it? Because I was going to say he's the opening act.
No, in between acts. Robin Williams was just the guy who was the clapper, he came in there to get people who were to stay there. In 2012, he also threw a party for his 70th, but this time he got Paul McCartney.
How much was Paul McCartney?
I don't remember the figure, but he also got Robin Williams. He brought Robin Williams back, yeah. And then in 2014, these lists don't usually get circulated, but it was leaked the amount per band at that time to get like them to do a private event for you.
Right.
And so we have a list that includes, but has well more names than this. I just put a few of them on here. In the highest tier, this is like 100,000, 200,000, sometimes up to 1 million. Taylor Swift was the only one who got over 1 million, even back then. Yeah. Robin Thicke, Nickelback, Mumford & Sons, Weezer, Vampire Weekend, Usher, Susan Boyle.
Yeah, well,
and that was 100 to 200,000 range. One Direction. All of those were in the highest tier. I can't imagine Susan Boyle, like what she would charge now, but it's not that much. In the second tier, you had people like Bob, Akon, 2 Chainz, Childish Gambino, Carly Rae Jepsen, Gym Class Heroes. It really dates it.
Yeah.
Jason Derulo, Mac Miller, and Lupe Fiasco. In the third tier, which is more like 30K to 50K, Common, Slash, T-Pain, Ollie Murs, Rick Ross, Future, Bastille, Billy Ray Cyrus, Pauly D. And then you start getting into the lowest of tiers, and you're looking at like 20K, Q-Tip, Old 97s, Travis Porter, even less than that was Tame Impala. Can you imagine? Like, that's crazy,
yeah,
right?
Nowadays.
It was like 10K for them back in 2014. And my friend was a huge fan in like 2012. So they would have, yeah, that's crazy. They could have actually afforded maybe now. I don't know. Super Mash Bros.
Super Mash
Bros? I just included, they start getting funny because I've never heard of some of these. Super Mash Bros, Uncle Cracker, Yin Yang Twins.
Oh, the Yin Yang Twins. Yeah. No, obviously. Yeah, the rappers.
Sponge, Rat King, Ryan Starr, and People Under the Stairs.
Ryan Starr sounds familiar, but I don't know from where.
I think he's got just one of those names. I know like one of his songs, but yeah, that's it. So if anybody's interested in renting out these people now to come do your party, I think
I don't think Childish Gambino is remotely even close to the second tier. I think
that's so funny.
He is in the first tier, no question about it.
Especially since I think he's retiring that character. Yeah. So 4 out of 10 for me, 6 out of 10 for you. We watched 2 episodes, so we did give it its due.
The reason I was glad about that we watched 2 is because after the first episode, I literally didn't have an opinion. I didn't know how to rate it. I didn't know if I liked it or disliked it.
It's very Norwegian in that way, where it's like a slow moving plot, and that's why I wanted to give it the break and say, well, maybe this is just some dark, amazing show, but like you really need to give it some time. And after 2 episodes, we just have to call it, I think, and say, all right, thanks for listening. We'll see you in the next episode. Hope you enjoyed this one. Bye.
Bye.